Okay. So I've often wondered, and I'm starting to believe it more and more, that the consciousness group perhaps is the key to disclosure. I know when I interviewed Grant Cameron, he's now swung that way as well. Do you believe that?
Yes, I do. But the whole thread of my contact with the ETs from the age of 8, which, as you know, continues to this day, has been one of consciousness itself, shared consciousness with the ETs, with the other life forms, with the plants, the trees, the earth itself. We all share that. And what they did teach me, that they use consciousness as a conduit for communication, a conduit for creation itself. And all the modalities of contact use consciousness as a conduit. That's the connecting key there. And I know that Ray Hernandez is bringing out a new book in October, I think, A Greater Reality. And he's bringing all these scientists together with some of the experiencers and just connecting all the dots, really. And he's been asked by his ET guides to form a new consciousness and contact research institute. And so he's moving forward. We all seem to have our own little piece of that jigsaw to help with this huge reveal, which is happening. It's happening as we speak, and it's happening to many now. So, in fact, I made a list earlier of all the people that seem to be working on this. And I've met quite a few of them. I'm quite surprised when I write the list down. I can probably read it to you. We've also got Ray Hernandez, who I've just mentioned. Dr. Rebecca Hardcastle-Wright with the Exo Consciousness Group. She's an experiencer. I know Rebecca, she's had contact all her life. Mary Rodwell, I was just watching another interview with Mary this morning. A fascinating woman. She's had contact as well. Grant Cameron, you've mentioned. Seb Talk. Terry Lovelace, and I've spoken with him this morning, and he's working on it. He's had his own experiences with the ETs, although some of them were very benevolent towards him. His story is slightly different. It's the other side of it, probably. But because Terry's an assistant or retired assistant attorney general, he carries some weight, and he's a retired law professor. And I know 2 other attorneys here who are experiencers, and they're speaking out. And I know Mike Merber and Lou Angelwolf, they have their own radio show, imho.love, every, I think, Wednesday at 7:30. They're talking about the ETs. They're both experiencers, and they have quite a following now. So, and there are many others. There's Karen Swain in Australia, Susie Hansen. She talks about the 3 waves of experiencer. I listened to an interview by her the other day. Absolutely fascinating. I've mentioned Costa McCrease, Susan Schatzer. She's now talking about consciousness and the ET presence on a regular basis on her shows. And I was speaking with Kathy Marden the other day, and she's now involved with a TV show in relation to her aunt and uncle, Betty and Barney Hill. Denise Stoner, she's continuing to speak with other experiencers. I spoke with her the other day. She's the assistant director for MUFON down here in Florida. And then there's another lady I was speaking to the other day, Mia Ferraletto. She has a consciousness and contact conference on July 23rd to 27th, and in South Dakota, I believe, again. And there's some of the leading speakers going up there to talk about the ET contact, but it's all related to consciousness. That is the key to the communication. And once we understand that, and we are beginning to understand that, and in fact, it's quite interesting when many years ago, you couldn't talk about telepathic communication, but now we as experiencers, when we get together, we talk about telepathic communication. I understand it, I know how it works. And as I said before, it's consciousness itself. It's the conscious energy. And we have to think of consciousness as an energy. And that's how we can then use it for communication and travel and creation, as I mentioned before. And the creation is using thought consciousness to create that reality, which is what we are now doing.
And I guess just to the the ordinary layman like myself, although I'm wrapping my head around consciousness and what it is, and but to the person who's never experienced what you're talking about, how do they know, when they are being conscious?
That's a very good question indeed. Um, I think we all understand that we are conscious in respect that we live, we breathe, we have relationships with family and friends. We have pets, animals, and they're conscious. We know that because they live, they breathe, they move, they do all the things that we do. What we're talking about now is higher levels of consciousness, which is only a vibrational frequency. And that's the difference between the higher dimensions, which they've explained that to me. They even give me an equation for calculating the vibrational frequency of a dimension. I mean, that's just fascinating. I couldn't find anybody that understood that equation. And then I was speaking with an experiencer, and she has an understanding of mathematics, and I gave her the equation and she explained it to me. I think I put it in a book that's coming out later on this year. So again, but you are correct. It's that thread of consciousness, and the ETs use that. And the only reason why we don't see them on a regular basis because they have to bring their vibrational frequency down so they can communicate with us. Or like myself, I take my vibrational frequency a little bit higher, and that allows me, and because I have an understanding of telepathic communication, because of all the years I've been practicing it, with confirmation, I might add, it all helps. But we're all here, and these people I've mentioned today, there are many, many more now working towards this. And what better time than now, really? We are in the change of a new world order. Perhaps we can create a society we desire for our children, for our future generations. And let's create that society using thought and consciousness, including the extraterrestrials. What a society that would be for our future generations.
Right. So again, for the person that hasn't experienced that higher level of consciousness, I mean, what would they need to use it for? To make contact with non-human intelligences, or for other things?
Well, I think for other things, I say there's many things. You can contact your deceased relatives. There are many mediums that do that. And that's using consciousness as a conduit for contact with your deceased family members. They're not deceased, they've moved to that higher level of consciousness. And I was given that experience of meeting with 30 generations of my deceased, as we call them, deceased family members. When I was 16, 17, 18, I was shown how to go and visit them using consciousness again, and I would go and visit and interact with them, but on that higher level of consciousness. And I did that for a period of 2 years. But that was to help me understand, again, a different part of consciousness. We have the physical down here in our third dimension, and my deceased family and relatives now live in the higher dimension without a physical. They're just pure conscious energy.
And when you talk about vibrational frequency, I immediately think of the law of attraction. I'm not sure if you've heard of Abraham Hicks and Esther Hicks, who teaches vibrational frequency. I mean, is that the same thing?
Yes, I would say it's the same thing, yes. I have read a little bit about the law of attraction. It's not something I normally talk about, but it's the same thing. You put the information out there, and then you're able to create that using your own thought and your consciousness itself. And when we realize that ability that we have, we can move forward as a society exponentially. It sounds simple to me because I understand it. I've been taught all these things over many years. And it's only when I start talking about them that I realize what they've taught me. It's just fascinating and amazing, really.
Yeah, and I also cast my mind back to Earl Nightingale. I mean, I'm not saying I'm that old, but the famous presentation he made about asking and receiving. And of course, I mean, you read the New Testament Bible. It's ask and you shall receive. So I'm tying the two in. I think the two.
I would say there's many connections. I think we as a species as humanity, have been on this journey for as long as we first came to this planet. Whether we were seeded here, whether we were created, I don't fully understand that yet. But I think we've had contact with these higher conscious beings, and they're guiding us. We're a very young human species. We are still developing, still evolving. And the next stage in the evolution is understanding consciousness. And our scientists are moving into that realm now, where they're beginning to understand this. Then once we do, it opens up the new realities that there are around us that we don't normally see. I'm able to tap into these realities again because I think they've given me those abilities or activated some part of my DNA. But we all have these abilities, we just don't use them.
Recently, I interviewed Kelly Sammy, who is a near-death experiencer, and she's doing some great work at the moment. But she actually died 12 years ago, left her body, and as I say, she died, and she had her experience, but came back. But when she came back, and the way she explained it to me is that she came back to her physical body, but she was basically two identities: consciousness and the physical body, and she identifies more with her consciousness being.
Right, okay, I would agree with that. When I was 9 years old, I was shown by Ort, one of the higher conscious beings, ETs, whatever label you want to put on them, how to separate my consciousness from my physical at the age of 9. And at that time, I didn't really fully understand the full potential of it. What I used to do, I would just leave my body, I'd relax, open my mind, leave my body and go and visit my grandparents who lived in Liverpool, 70 miles away. I would sit upstairs in the master bedroom, in the dressing room there, and I could see down through the opaque floor, and my grandmother would be in the kitchen cooking, usually on a Sunday, and my grandfather either watching TV or reading the newspaper. And I would just sit there and get comfort from doing that. But that was just separating my consciousness. But I often wondered, what would they see if they came upstairs? I'm here in their master dressing room, and what would they see? I now know the answer to that. They would have seen my pure conscious energy, which would have been 4 to 6 inches across, an orb shape, slightly vibrating, orangey yellow in colour. And that would have been my conscious energy, which I've transported over there to see them. So I suppose that's like having a near-death experience without the near-death experience.
Right.
And I used to use that all the time. And it wasn't until I got to 16, 17, 18 again, and I thought nobody talks about this. So I started asking my friends. We didn't have the internet then, and nobody knew anything about it. So I just accepted it and then asked my ET guides again for more information, and they continued with the lessons. And what they tended to do was they didn't sit me down in a classroom and taught me individual things. They gave me an experience, and the experience was the lesson itself, and showing me how to travel outside of the body as pure conscious energy, which I can still do to this day. And that's how they can travel as well. That's how they communicate as well. So if I have those abilities, because it's been awakened in me, then we can awaken those abilities in others. And it doesn't take much. I have a friend of mine who I worked with for many years. He was a detective, still a good friend. He's retired now. And he comes over every year for a vacation. And he's always been a total skeptic. Doesn't believe in ETs, UFOs, or anything spiritual at all. But we're still very good friends. And one day we were sat out by my pool deck. It was me, my wife, him and his wife. And I said, did you want a beer? So he said, yeah, I'll have a beer. So I went into the house. I got a couple of beers. As I was getting the beers out of the fridge, I said to the ETs, now will be a good time to show us a craft. So I got the 2 beers. I walked back out into the pool deck. I opened the beers, sat down, gave him a bottle and me a bottle, and a craft appeared immediately at the back of our home. It flew horizontally, stopped, horizontally again, stopped, horizontally again, and then just shot straight up at a huge speed. So my friend was absolutely astounded.
Wow.
Now, Now, does he believe now in ETs and UFOs and consciousness? Yes, he does. He now does his own research. He was awakened by one episode of seeing a craft. I think we all have that. We just need that key to open the door. It might be a feeling that you feel a deceased family member stood next to you. You can feel that extra energy. If you allow yourself to open up to that energy, then you can have that communication with using consciousness itself. Yes.